Hi everyone. So I found out this morning we've got two of our students out. So what I thought we would do instead, since that's half of our class, I would just record this lesson, which is lesson 9 on some mission statements, goals and objectives, so that you guys could all have access to it, so that we'd be all on the same page when we meet for class on Thursday when we do the application of this material. It's not going to be a super highly polished recording. Just bear with me because I'm kind of doing this on the fly, but I want you guys to have access to this information. It's not the most exciting, provocative, interesting things to talk about, but mission statements, goals, and objectives, writing them, knowing what they are, is a very, very important, and it's a very important skill that you'll need to use as future health education specialists. So these are the learning objectives for today. We're going to explain the terms, what a mission statement is, what a vision statement is, and distinguish between the two. We're going to, of course, define goals and objectives and talk about the different types and how to write them, characteristics of them, talk about the different levels. We'll talk about a SMART objective. Now, we've heard the term SMART goal. Many of you guys probably have heard this term before, and so I tell you what, I'll jump ahead. I'm jumping ahead of myself, so we'll get to that in just a minute. We'll talk about elements of an objective, how to write them. So when you're thinking about a program or an organization's missions, goals, and objectives, all three of these things together kind of in sum provide a foundation for program planning. And this little reverse upside down triangle represents kind of the broad, how basically broad or general these types of components are to how specific they are. So you can see that the mission statement is of course going to be the most broad. Sorry about that. Followed by goals and followed by objectives. So whenever you're thinking about how these three things compare as far as their spectrum, as far as how general they are, how specific they are, think about this inverted pyramid going from mission goals to objectives as far as their generality, starting at mission statements being big, going down to much smaller and refined with objectives. All right, so what is a mission statement? And we're going to talk about some of the nuanced differences between a mission statement and a vision statement. A mission statement is simply a short narrative that describes the purpose and focus of a particular program. It may reflect the philosophy that is behind it, and it helps to guide planners in the development of the program goals and objectives. So starting at that mission statement or having a good mission statement is really important. Quick and easy, very easy way to remember the key difference between a mission statement and a vision statement is that vision statements talk about what we want to do, and mission statements discuss how we get there, okay? So I can't play this recording while using the screen recording app that I'm using to record this lecture, because basically what's going to happen is when I go to upload it to YouTube, it's going to check for like basically copying and plagiarism and things like that, or copywriting, and it's going to pick this up and then it won't let me post it. So what I want you guys to do when you have a moment is to actually listen to this. It's only a couple of minutes long. This is Dan Heath, I believe, and he's talking about writing a mission statement. And it's broken down into kind of really key like non-jargony language. It's broken down in a way that I feel like is really relatable and understandable. So please watch it. Again, I think he does just an excellent job of talking about, okay, this is a good mission statement, this is not a good mission statement, and these are the reasons why. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that when you're writing a mission statement, it tends to be something that is very important and it's going to kind of guide the future direction in many cases for many years and for many people and for many projects. So of course, you want to spend some time to kind of make sure that you're getting it right and that you're getting all this feedback, or that everyone is having a say in what's going into this very important guiding statement. But sometimes that can lead to these mission statements that sound kind of meaningless and vague and weepy and don't really have, you read it and you're like, I don't really feel anything from that, or what is that really even trying to say? It just gets too broad and too general. So I would encourage you, please watch that. We're going to talk about some examples in just a minute. But before we do, some examples or, excuse me, some characteristics of high quality vision statements. They should be, big and beautiful. They should state the role in achieving your big goal. It evolves with time, it's aspirational, it's moral. Mission statements, the three key things that good mission statements all have in common. And list the characteristics here. Oops, sorry about that. Extremely clear, answers the what and by when. It evolves with time. It's measurable to some degree, and it's others focused. What I want you guys to remember is actually in this graphic. It says that the things that the best mission statements all have in common. It answers what your company does, states why your company does it, and defines how your company does it. So I wanted to give you three examples of good mission statements that were cited in this article that I recently read. Believe it or not, this is Amazon's. To be Earth's most customer-centric company where customers can find and discover anything they might want to buy online, and endeavors to offer its customers the lowest possible prices. To become, this is ASOS, this is a clothing company, for those of you who may not know, is to become the #1 fashion destination for 20-somethings globally. It's very simple, sweet, to the point, very clear. And then a little bit more applicable or relevant to what we're studying. This is for the American Red Cross. And I really love this one. To prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. So I would encourage you to go back and think about, okay, do these three examples cite what your company does, why it does it, and it defines how your company does it, right? So go back and apply those three and see what you can figure out and make sure that they cover those. All right, characteristics of program goals. All right, so here's the thing that I was alluding to earlier. We were going through the learning objectives. Many times we refer to the words goals, objectives, really just goals and objectives are terms that are used across many different professions and many different fields, and they lack sometimes concrete definitions or, definitive. They can be interpreted different ways. Key thing for this course, what I want you to remember is that when we are talking about goals, sometimes we'll hear people say, I want you to write a SMART goal, okay? Well, in context of this course and the way that we're going to talk about goals, goals are broad statements. We can write specific objectives, specific standing for, SMART standing for specific, measurable, action-oriented, so on and so forth. We'll get to that in just a minute. Goals are not supposed to be meet those SMART objectives. Goals, for context of this course and the way that we're going to talk about them, are broad. They describe the expected outcomes of a program, and they're much less specific than objectives. They serve as a long-term kind of expectation for the program, and they are the foundation for setting program objectives, for setting the SMART program objectives. Okay. They provide a direction for the program, and they always say, well, if you don't know where you're going, how would you know that you got there? Goals really kind of help to keep you on track and to have that vision that, gosh, it's hard to talk about these without using the terms in a way that is confusing or overlapping, because they're so commonly used, like vision, mission, values, etc. So goals help to provide that kind of guiding light to where it is that your project or your program or your company is going. They are usually written in simple statements, sometimes, most of the time, not in complete sentences, and they should be really self-explanatory. And there are three essential components of a good goal. It's going to tell you what's going to change, who will be affected, and where that change is going to occur. And they include action verbs, okay? And we'll have some, in your class activity on Thursday, you guys will have some time to practice this, and I'll give you a list of action verbs that you can use when writing these types of objectives. But some examples you might use would be evaluate, know, improve, increase, promote, protect, minimize, etc. So here are some examples. Eliminate childhood measles in Kansas City. Increase physical activity among middle school students in the U.S. Reduce the incidence of influenza among residents of Delaware County. Okay. All right. So let's move on and talk for a minute about objectives. Objectives these are the precise statements of the intended outcomes. Okay, they may specify the intermediate accomplishments or benchmarks that represent progress toward a goal. And they really are the things that are outlining, in very specific, measurable terms, what changes are going to occur in the priority population at a given point as a result of exposure to the program or activity. Okay, so objectives, we're going to be writing SMART objectives, not SMART goals. Really, and of course this is kind of intuitive, but achieving objectives is, really, if you're able to achieve your objectives, in theory, you should be able, your goal of your program should be accomplished, right? Because all of your objectives are the specific things that are going to happen that are working towards that common, more general goal. And it makes sense, right? Like if you were to achieve all of your objectives, in turn, your goal is going to be accomplished, or at least, that's what we're hoping to see. Okay, so there are 3 different levels of objectives, okay? And we're going to talk about, when we start talking about program planning, I think it's at the end of this semester or the beginning of next semester, and I can't remember, at 420. But we're going to be talking about writing objectives for a program. We're going to talk about process objectives, impact objectives, and outcome objectives. So process objectives are the types of objectives that have to deal with kind of the nuts and bolts of your program, right? These are the tasks. These are like, work or work plans or, events that are being held, like how many people attended this, public health rally, or how many flyers were distributed to in a particular neighborhood, whatever. These are kind of these are the things that are measuring the activities that make up your program. The nuts and bolts logistics, they're usually pretty easy to measure because they're objective. You're counting something, you're looking at how many things you distributed or how many people attended. So they're usually pretty straightforward, but they're not sufficient, right? Impact objectives are the things that are kind of the next step. So if we see all these process objectives are getting done, where in theory we're going to say, all right, well, these are kind of the immediate observable effects of a program, right? So these may include like the learning objectives, the behavioral objectives, and then like the environmental objectives. So if you're trying to increase healthy eating patterns in K-12 students in a particular county, your process objectives might be, okay, how many nutrition education programs did you do? How many schools were reached? How many school lunch programs did you work with to help improve the quality of the meals for their school lunch program? Those are process objectives. Using that same example, impact objectives would be things like measuring, okay, well, looking at like student behaviors or knowledge or beliefs. So say you measure at the start and the end of your intervention, do students know what healthy foods are? What are their feelings or beliefs or attitudes about healthy foods? Those are kind of the intermediate objectives that you're hoping to see between, okay, I did my activity, I hope to see this change in behavior, and now ultimately outcome objectives, which may be sometimes, years off. You're hoping to see healthier eating patterns. Maybe your ultimate outcome is lower rates of childhood obesity, right? That would be kind of your long-term outcome objective. And sometimes those are really hard to measure just because of time and collecting data, but we'll talk about those as well in more detail. You want to kind of consider, your time, which is what I was just kind of talking about with the previous slide. Short-term, intermediate, or long-term. Short-term might be things like, tend to be your process objectives. Intermediate tend to be your impact objectives, and outcome objectives tend to be your long-term objectives. Okay, so your objectives should be SMART. Okay, going back to that acronym, which we probably have all heard before. What does that mean? SMART stands for specific, right? Specific that we want to accomplish. Measurable, meaning you have a way to measure whether or not your particular objective was reached. Is it achievable? Meaning, is it realistic? Is it something that is realistic within the confines or the limitations of the time and the space and the other resources that you have. Is it relevant? Is it relevant to your work? There's lots of things that we can measure or do, but, and this seems kind of silly. Why would you do something that's not going to be, relevant for whatever it is you're doing? But sometimes people get, a little off track, and so you have to kind of go back and revisit and say, okay, is this really relevant? Is this really going to be impactful or helpful for what we're trying to do? And is it time bound? Basically, you have said, all right, these are the time restraints that we're going to be working with. So some questions to consider when you're writing program objectives. This is kind of going back to the SMART acronym we just went through. Can they be realistically achieved? Does it have the resources? Are the objectives consistent with the policies and procedures? Do they violate the rights of those who are involved? Ethical considerations. Is it appropriate for cultural populations, objectives, etc.? And just as a quick check, going back and kind of checking those SMART goals, did you answer the following? Did you talk about who? Did you talk about what, where, when, and how much? Right? All right, some examples. After educational session number 5 pertaining to stress management in the Heart Healthy program in Franklin County, 75% of participants will be able to properly demonstrate 3 essential skills associated with meditation. 1 year after completing the Heart Healthy program in Franklin County, 50% of participants will report checking blood pressure on a monthly basis, and by December 31st, 2023, county commissioners in Franklin County will approve development of 2 new walking paths. So in sum, these are just kind of the summary points. A mission statement provides an overview of a program. Goals and objectives provide a foundation for the program. Planning and evaluation. Goals are general in nature, usually not measurable, but objectives are specific and measurable and consist of the steps used to reach the program goals. They should be written for several different levels, intermediate, and then outcome, all the way to outcome, and using the SMART acronym. And then kind of going through and double checking and making sure, did you answer the who, what, where, when, why, and how? Okay, that's it for today, guys. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions about this content, please just let me know.